There's a woman named Sarah Ransom, and she claimed that she had videotapes of Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, and Richard Branson having sex with underage, both boys and girls.
The public has a right to get answers on this Epstein situation.
I was having dinner at Caroline Kennedy's house on Martha's Vineyard with Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton. He walks away for about 15 or 20 minutes and is talking very intensely to the person on the other side of the phone. It was Jeffrey Epstein.
Was Bill Clinton having sex on that island with anybody other than his wife?
He was on Epstein's plane. They flew together with Mick Jagger, but a lot of people were on his plane.
Was Jeffrey Epstein providing access to women for sexual reasons to other people?
We don't know about Prince Andrew. There is no client list, but there is a list of people that the FBI questioned some of the alleged victims about.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again, we are lucky to have the great Alan Dershowitz here today. Thanks for joining us, Alan.
Well, happy to be questioned by the great Brady Knowlton, who has been a real hero and defender and protector of the Constitution, all of our rights. And so I want to congratulate you for coming through this thing with flying colors and helping the American public understand that sometimes doing the right thing is rewarded. Not always. If it has fighters like you, it's going to be coming out the right way.
Winning ugly is still winning. So what we're going to get in today, this is going to be this is an Epstein episode with Alan Dershowitz, and we're going to get into the nitty gritty. You've done a really good job with being completely transparent and clearing your name. Public sentiment is moving in your direction. But I still have some stuff I want to just clear up, and I want to get right to it. Well, I want to start kind of bigger picture with trying to satisfy some of the curiosities, and I feel like that the public has a right to get answers on this Epstein situation, and then we're going to get into some real specific stuff with you. But do you, from what you've seen, does Bill Clinton have reason to be concerned that he could be prosecuted for sex crimes?
Oh, absolutely not. No. Bill Clinton knew Jeffrey Epstein. I'll tell you a story that's, I think, never been told before. This is a name-dropping story. I was having dinner at Caroline Kennedy's house on Martha's Vineyard with Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton and my wife. And he was president, and the Secret Service comes over to him with a phone and says an important phone call. So, I thought it was about national security or something. He walks away for about 15 or 20 minutes and is talking very intensely to the person on the other side of the phone. And then he comes back to the table and says, Alan, somebody wants to talk to you. And he hands me the phone, and it was Jeffrey Epstein. He was talking to Clinton for about 15 or 20 minutes. This is well before Epstein was charged with anything. Everybody thought he was just a philanthropist who was giving a lot of money to Harvard and other places. So there was a friendship there. There's no doubt. There was an acquaintanceship with me as well. And then I became his lawyer. But it was only in 2005 and 6, 7, and 8 that anybody learned that he had been doing anything improper with young females. But none of us knew that at the time. He kept completely separate his private life. In fact, when you went to his home in Palm Beach, there was an entrance, and if you turned left, there was a living room, a kitchen, and 4 guest bedrooms, which I stayed in. I'm sure many others have stayed in, Nobel Prize winners, etc. And then if you turned the other way, there was a staircase, and nobody was allowed up that staircase, and there was a whole wing of the house that was forbidden to people. We were told privacy was a private wing, but now we know that things were going on, not when we were there, but things were going on in that wing that became the subject of criminal prosecution. But none of us knew that at the time. We just thought Jeffrey Epstein was a bright, intelligent, funny, very, very wealthy guy.
Was Bill Clinton having sex on that island with anybody other than his wife?
Never on the island. He was never on the island. There was all kind of proof.
Anywhere else related to Jeffrey Epstein, was Jeffrey Epstein in any way providing him women?
There's no evidence of that at all. He was on Epstein's plane. They flew together with Mick Jagger and others to Asia to do some healthcare stuff. But a lot of people were on his plane. I was on his plane, of course, because I was his lawyer. He would always send his claim for his legal team, and we would have a little table, and we would sit around preparing the arguments that we were making for the district attorney and the U.S. attorney on his plane. So I don't know of any evidence that Bill Clinton did anything wrong. And I think he also terminated his relationship with Epstein once Epstein was arrested.
Was Jeffrey Epstein providing access to women or introductions to women for sexual reasons to other people?
I don't know. I mean, we don't know about Prince Andrew. We know there's an accusation, an allegation by the same woman who, accused me, but then she ultimately admitted she had mistaken me for somebody else and withdrew all of her charges against me. But she settled the case with Prince Andrew. Her argument was that Prince Andrew had sex with her. She was paid $15,000 for it, and she was well above the age of consent. So it wouldn't have been a crime for Prince Andrew. It would have been a crime for her because she was paid for having sex. But I don't know. There is no client list, but there is a list of people that the FBI questioned some of the alleged victims about. And that list included people like George Mitchell, the former senator, Bill Richardson, the former ambassador to the UN, Ehud Barak, the former prime minister of Israel, Jacques Cousteau's granddaughter, and a range of other people are on those FBI interviews, but I have no idea whether the interviews are valid or not. I'll give you an example. There's a woman named Sarah Ransom, and she claimed that she had videotapes of Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, and Richard Branson having sex with underage, both boys and girls. And she went to the New York Post and sent them a series of emails. I have the emails, but they've been suppressed by the court. Why were they suppressed by the court? Because ultimately, after an investigation, she admitted she made up the whole story. And so you can't turn out material that says, oh my God, Sarah Ransom accused Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, et cetera, Donald Trump, without also disclosing that she then admitted that the whole thing was false. So if you're going to turn out accusations, you have to also disclose the material about the accusers that might raise doubts about their credibility, and it's been the courts that have been suppressing the material, not the Trump administration. The Trump administration, as far as has been turning out everything.
I want to get into that, but first, what I want to kind of establish here is this is my working theory on what I believe occurred. I think that Jeffrey Epstein blackmailed Leslie Wexner, and somehow got access to all his wealth. So he took ownership of the largest mansion in Manhattan, which was owned by Leslie Wexner. Leslie Wexner owned Abercrombie and Fitch, Victoria's Secret, and Epstein had something on him. Epstein gets a power of attorney over all this guy's finances. Now he has access to tremendous wealth, planes, what have you, and he used this to indulge in his hedonistic behaviors.
Well, that's a plausible theory. Just to add to the conspiracy theory, guess who just bought the biggest and fanciest residence in all of Martha's Vineyard? Bless.
Oh, really?
He now bought the farm that is about a mile and a half away from me. And he paid $37 million for this piece of land. I know the piece of land very well because it was in 1990 for $900,000. So,
oh wow!
Don't ever ask me for investments on real estate. You know how much money I could have made if I had bought that piece of land for less than $1 million and then sold it for $37 million. Obviously,
a lot of
but on that time, the architect Foster bought it and made it into a phenomenal home. But it's just been announced yesterday that it was bought by a trust. And I know the trustee, and the trustee is Leslie Wexner's lawyer. So I'm 100% certain that the Wexner family has bought this beautiful piece of property in Martha's Vineyard. I don't think they're going to be treated very well here because Martha's Vineyard doesn't treat people well who have any association with Republicans or Donald Trump.
That's why I don't buy there, man. I'd like to be your neighbor, but I don't. I don't know if the other people would enjoy that on Martha's Vineyard.
But nobody else would. They don't enjoy me either. I mean, I'm
Oh, you are persona non grata.
I also at the New York Times. The New York Times, I was a best-selling author. I think I had 8 bestsellers and many front-page book reviews and other book reviews. And since I defended Donald Trump, they won't review any of my books. I have a new book out now called The Preventive State. Most important book I ever wrote, my 57th book. And my magnum opus, and the Times won't even review it because, my God, I defended Donald Trump, so I must be a terrible person. It's just left-wing McCarthyism that we're seeing from the New York Times, from Martha's Vineyard, and from other people on the left.
Well, work with me, Alan. Let's sell this damn book today. Okay, give us some gold. Okay, what is something that you can tell us? And really, I want you to think about this. And we got time here. You have said this is for people that don't know, this is the 3rd podcast which Alan has with me, which he has been disclosing information about Epstein, completely transparent. And in a previous podcast, you said that you thought that Epstein had blackmailed Leslie Wexner. You thought there was potential because he said that he didn't have to worry about
That's right.
About him. So did he have access to all Leslie Wexner's wealth?
He did. It was a strange thing. I've never heard of a man worth $9 billion, which is what Leslie Wexner is worth, basically turning over to somebody who didn't graduate college, who didn't go to college at all, his wealth and saying basically to Epstein, look, you handle it the way you think and take a percent. You know what 1% of $9 billion is? You know,
$90 million bucks. Yeah.
He became very, very wealthy. And you're right about the mansion and the airplane and all of that. So there has not been a sufficient investigation of the relationship between Jeffrey Epstein and Leslie Wexner. And we'll see if that ever does come to fruition. Look, there's one way of solving all these issues. Give Ghislaine Maxwell, who is serving an unjust sentence of 20 years in prison, give her immunity and call her in front of Congress. She knows everything. She was with Epstein for 35 years, maybe even longer. Started out as his girlfriend, then became his assistant secretary and all that. She knows everything. So just give her immunity and make her testify in front of Congress. I know a lot. I know much more than the media knows, but I don't know everything. I just know what Jeffrey Epstein told me. But she knows what she saw. She arranged for all the travel. Whenever I had to go down and make an appearance in court on behalf of Epstein, she's the one who either arranged for his plane to come and get me or arranged for me to fly commercially. So she knew all the people who were coming to see him. She knew about Bill Clinton. She could give you all the information, but for some reason they haven't subpoenaed her.
Was there travel or planes or anything that you're aware of that was paid for by Leslie Wexner in a roundabout way?
Well, I think that the airplane that he owned, his private jet, I think that came from Leslie Wexner originally. Don't know what the deal was, but there's some indication that he got took sweetheart deals, that he got real sweetheart deals on the mansion in New York and on the airplane. I don't know that. I was in his home in Palm Beach. I was in his home in New York, but I was never in his home in Paris. And my wife and daughter and I were on his island like months after he bought it, when it was a deserted island. There were no buildings or anything like that except the original building. And there were no women on the island except for Ghislaine Maxwell. And we had dinner there one night with a professor from the Harvard Business School, Michael Porter. And that was the only time I was ever on the island.
What building were you? What facility were you in on the island? What was it? His house?
A series of little bungalows. And my daughter and I, she was about 10. My daughter and my wife and I stayed in a bungalow, and he had a little bungalow also, or he stayed in the main house. The main house, was interesting, was made out of coral, but there were no other buildings and no facilities, and there were workmen on the island who were trying to fix it up, but there were no young people on the island, and the only woman I saw on the island the whole time we were there was Ghislaine Maxwell. I would say we saw 6 or 7 men who were workers or handymen and stuff, but it was before it had become, quote, Lolita Island.
So Alan was on the island. Who else do you know of was on the island?
There was a claim that Stephen Hawking, was on the island and participated in an orgy. In fact, I was accused of participating in an orgy with Stephen Hawking. That would have been a little difficult,
He couldn't
trying
move.
to jump over his wheelchair to participate. There was no truth to that, of course. There was a lot of false stories. I don't know who else was on the island. There's some evidence. There's some records because, the people who were on the island had to fly. There was no airport on the island. There was a helicopter pad, but you fly into St. Thomas, I think, and then you go there, and the authorities in St. Thomas have names of people who were on the island. The crucial issue is not were you on the island, but when were you on the island? Was it before or during the time when it was used for improper purposes? I can tell you that Michael Porter and I.
Well, there were those strange buildings that look like something out of like a modern representation of ancient Egypt, and some kind of, that looks like some kind of bizarre location for a ritual or something, almost like modern druids. What is that? What were those buildings?
I don't know. I was never there during that period of time. I was also on his home he bought the King Ranch in New Mexico, and I brought a friend of mine who lived in New Mexico, and his wife and my wife and me and our daughter, and we went to his home in New Mexico, but nobody was there, just work people. And we were allowed to go in and look at the place that was being repaired. My friend who I went with collects desert things like skulls, and so he collected places to live because he had all this money, and he was right, by the way, from a real estate perspective. Unlike me, who didn't buy what was just sold for $37 million, he bought everything he could get his hands on. So when he died, he had a very expensive ranch in New Mexico, a beautiful home in New York, an apartment in Paris, the island, and who knows what else.
Can you address the sworn testimony from victims claiming that they were trafficked to that ranch?
Well, that. I don't know of any truth to that. He used to have sessions in the ranch with academic. Professors. He had some of these bizarre views on genetics, and he wanted to populate the world with brilliant people who were genetically engineered or something. And he would have I never went to one of those things, but he had salons and seminars on
like eugenics, similar.
I don't know what else went on there because I wasn't there except for that.
So he was a eugenicist.
Yeah, he was, and he was. I think you can appropriately call him a racist. He had absolute beliefs in the hierarchy of races, and he had very strange views. And he set up a sub-department at Harvard on genetic evolution, and he contributed money for a professorship. And every month he would have a seminar at Harvard in his office. He had a private office in Brattle Square near Harvard. And I would go to all of those events because I would meet great people. For example, he sat me next to a guy named George, maybe his name was George Church. I don't remember. The guy who decoded the genome. He had been on the Harvard faculty with me for 20 years. I'd never met him. But Epstein introduced me, very prominent people, including the president of Harvard and the provost of Harvard, would come to these scientific events. I actually gave a paper at one of them and critiqued the paper at another, but there were no young people there. There were waiters, waitresses who served the food for lunch, but they were students. There was nobody who was 15 or 16 or anything like that. If any of us had seen anything like that, obviously we would have terminated our relationship.
Was he a Jewish supremacist?
He wasn't much of a Jew. He didn't identify as a Jew. He identified much more as just a white American. I never heard him talk about his Jewishness as such. So no, I don't think we would call him that. He had never been to Israel. The only time he ever went to Israel, as far as I know, was I was there with my wife and daughter for a semester on leave. I was writing a book called The Genesis of Justice about the Bible. He called and he said, I've never been to Israel. I'd love to come visit you. And so he flew in one day from Paris at about 10 o'clock in the morning. He asked me to arrange a lunch with Israel's 5 or 6 smartest people, and I did. And we had lunch at the Citadel Hotel in Jerusalem. I think it was Citadel. And then I took a walk with him in the Shook, the market, and then he got on his airplane and left. So one thing I can assure you about, he was not a Mossad spy. I
Okay.
know that for sure.
Well,
But he didn't have much of a connection with his Jewishness. For him, his Jewishness was more about, food, Coney Island, hot dogs, and I don't remember him ever going to synagogue or identifying with the Jewish religion.
I want to get into some very specific times and dates, and
Sure.
and give you an opportunity to either to clear your name or to elaborate on these topics in a way that feeds the public interest.
I'm saying I don't need to clear my name. My name has been completely cleared. The woman who accused me admitted that she may have mistaken me, misidentified.
I just mean in the court of public opinion, and we're going against the barbarian horde here that cannot take no for an answer. They have to have their conspiracy confirmed, and I think there's going through all the court documents and all the available evidence, there's just some things here that I think you should address. And so on July 19th, 2002. The flight logs show you were on his plane traveling from Palm Beach to New York with Epstein, Ghislaine, Maxwell, and several unidentified females. Can you tell us the purpose of that trip, and can you tell us who the unidentified females were?
We had gone to Kennedy Space Center. He was very friendly with Golden, the head of of NASA. And he invited me and my nephew and to go to the Space Center. And, the unidentified females were probably, 35, 40, 50-year-old people who were friends of his. I know he was friendly with an art collector and an art dealer, but there were no young people on the plane. I can guarantee you that. But I don't remember the exact purpose. But I did fly in his plane on numerous occasions. I was his lawyer. I was his advisor on a lot of issues, and so it was natural that I would fly in his plane. And but I know of no situation. I know I never flew on his plane with anybody who was young. When he flew me to his island, he flew me, my wife, and daughter on a private plane from either Martinique or Guadeloupe. We were vacationing there, a little plane, and we flew to St. Thomas, and then there was a boat that took us to his island. But I was on his plane, I would say, certainly a handful or more, maybe as much as 7 or 8 times. During the course of time. It terminated, obviously, once I represented him and I ended my personal relationship with him, and the relationship became a completely professional relationship.
Okay, so Epstein's former housekeeper, Juan Alessi, testified that you were in his Palm Beach mansion pretty often, and that sometimes you received massages while underage girls were present.
No, that's just not true. I received one shoulder massage. I have a bad shoulder. I sleep with a heating pad at night because when I was a kid, I had the back of a car, the hood of a car land on my neck. And so I've had a bad neck and a bad shoulder. And the only massages I generally have are shoulder, back, and neck massages. I had one. It was from a Russian or a Ukrainian woman named Olga. She was in her 50s, and that was confirmed by the housekeeper, but I never had another massage. I'm not a massage person. So I've had one shoulder and neck massage, period.
Were there ever any underage girls in those houses that you knew of?
Never, ever, under any circumstances. I think the youngest woman I ever met at his house was his secretary, whose name I don't remember, who was probably 25 or 26. And she was at the house all the time. I never saw a topless person. I never saw a naked person. I never saw a naked picture on the wall. There were claims there were naked pictures on the wall. Let me tell you how I know there were no naked pictures. In 2004 or 5, my granddaughter, who's a soccer player, won a tournament in New York, and she was invited to participate in a soccer tournament in Florida. And I mentioned that to Epstein, that we were coming down to Florida. We were staying at the Breakers or something, and he said, "No, don't stay at the Breakers. My house is empty. I'm not going to be there. I'm away. Take over the house." So I did. And we had my granddaughter, my grandson, my wife, my son, my daughter-in-law, my other son. We all stayed in this house for about a week. And believe me, if there had been a single naked picture anywhere, I wouldn't have allowed my grandchildren to be there. So, I did stay in this house for a week, and there were no, I ultimately found out, by the way, that during that week, the police, unbeknownst to him or anybody else, were investigating him, and they were going through all the garbage. So they went through our garbage. Obviously, they didn't find anything because I was just there with my family. So no, there was never any underage people or any pictures or anything inappropriate. The only picture that was in his house, and he loved to show this to people. He had a picture of a very attractive, an old picture from about 1900, a sepia picture of a very attractive model of Rodin, a Rodin model. And then he had next to it a picture of a very haggard old woman. And he would show it to people and say, you see this beautiful young woman? Look what became of her. And then he would show the second picture, which was the same woman years later. And he would say, that's why I'm not getting married.
That house was famously raided, right? Later on, it was raided, and they found evidently lots of discs and CDs, and that something happened to that evidence. And people...
No, it's there. The evidence is all there. What happened was this. The house was raided, and they found a lot of stuff in the part of the house that nobody was allowed in. And there were cameras and all that kind of thing. There was one set of cameras in the living room because one of his employees had stolen money and a gun from his desk drawer in the living room. So he got the Palm Beach police to install a camera in the living room, and it caught, apparently, the perpetrator. Perpetrator was fired. But I'm not aware of any evidence of any cameras that were ever in the guest bedrooms that would photograph. I wish there were, because it would clearly exculpate me. I never did anything wrong. But there were videos that he bought, commercials, sex videos, that he bought and watched himself, and some of them were seized, and they're in the files.
Well, Pam Bondi said, she said that there are thousands of videos of sex with underage girls. Is that
involving Epstein or any of the people he knows? They may have been commercial. You can go online. I've never bought any, I don't know, but you can go online and you can buy, porn. That's what it was. As far as I know, there isn't a single video that I'm aware of, and I went through all the evidence, but a single video of either Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell or any of the people he knew having sex with anybody, certainly not underage girls. So I'm not aware of that.
Why is this evidence being obfuscated? And I understand, we've talked about it, that there are accusers that have potentially perjured themselves, okay? But what else is being protected here by these courts? Why is this evidence being disclosed? And then I want you to answer the second part. Why is the DOJ only moving to unseal the grand jury testimony and not everything?
They should move to unseal everything. What they don't want to do is fall into the Sarah Ransom trap. I think I've mentioned Sarah Ransom is a woman who went to the New York Post and sent them a series of emails. I have the emails. I can't disclose them because they're sealed under court order. But in the emails, she accuses Donald Trump and Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton and Richard Branson of having sex with underage boys and girls, and says she has videos of it. And then she admitted she made up the whole story. So, they've suppressed that because they think she's a victim. She's not a victim. She's a perpetrator. She's a criminal, but they're protecting her. And it's the court that's protecting her. We have tried to get hold of those materials, but the judges have said no. So don't blame it on the Trump administration. Blame it on the two federal judges in New York that had pressed the material. And now I think the Trump administration, I've said this on television, maybe they've listened to me, is now seeking to get this material. I, from day one, when I was accused, from day one, I said I waive any privacy rights, any confidentiality rights, disclose everything involving me because I know I did nothing wrong. And so I want to see everything disclosed. I don't want to see anything withheld, period.
To your knowledge, was Trump ever on any of Epstein's planes?
Oh, I don't know if he was on planes. I know he was at his house because I saw him. I saw him there once when an astronaut came from outer space and showed photographs to a group of guests. There were a whole bunch of prominent financiers there. And then a guy comes over to me and says, hi, my name's Andrew. What's your name? I said, Alan. And he was wearing a sweatshirt. Everybody else was dressed with a tie and jacket. I said, what do you do for a living? He said, I work for my mom. I said, what company is that? Have I ever heard of it? And he said, yeah, it's called Great Britain. My mom's the queen. That's how I met Prince Andrew at Jeffrey Epstein's house. And my recollection is Trump was there too, was perfectly innocent. And many other prominent industrialists and academics were there. He would have these great events where, the guy just comes back from outer space with pictures that had never been seen before. And we saw them. They were very prominent people. A woman named Wang, who is somebody who does clothing, and a lot of people who are famous. I don't know all of them, but he would always love to introduce me to the famous people.
So in many instances, you can have the press enter a case as an intervener, and if it's in public interest and the press moves to have items unsealed, you can accomplish it that way.
Yeah.
Why can't we have the press and the Trump DOJ make a motion to unseal everything and just end the conspiracy theories once and for all? Why is that not happening?
Good. I would join that motion.
No,
I'd like to see everything out there, and I would think that the press should do it. A lot of this stuff is already out there. The press just hasn't looked hard for it.
But Alan, I got to ask you, if you know everything that's being sealed, why is the Trump administration not moving for complete transparency? Why only unseal the grand jury testimony? What is in there that would potentially cause damage to the administration?
Nothing, as far as I know, and I think they should be doing it, and I think maybe they will be doing it. And I would like to see everything out there. And you know what this reminds me of? I don't know if you remember this. Maybe you're too young to remember this, but about 15, 20 years ago, Geraldo Rivera made a lot of fame when he said, "I have access to Al Capone's secret bank vault, and I'm going to open it on live television and disclose all of Al Capone's secrets." For weeks and weeks at a time, it built up to it. And finally, the TV cameras were on. It was live. Geraldo opened up the vault, and there was nothing in it. And that, for me, is a metaphor to what's going on. Everybody wants to know what the secret documents are. And I think the secret documents fall into two categories. Famous people, but that's all been disclosed. There's everything we want to know about Donald Trump is out there. And then there's probably some secrets that haven't been disclosed about people who are obscure. I know of one of them. I know of, for example, an accusation that somebody I know a bit had sex with one people down in his island. And that's been suppressed by the court. That's been redacted. But if his name is revealed, everybody will say, "Who is he? I never heard of him. He was just an obscure person who happened to be a friend of Jeffrey Epstein." So I think there's going to be a lot of ho-hum when all the information finally comes out.
What else is there that you feel that the public needs to know? What can you give them to help satisfy their curiosity?
Will never satisfy their curiosity. What I want to see out is all the information about the accusers. Lots of women got lots of money from making false accusations, and their lawyers profited enormously from it as well. And I'd like to see that part of the undisclosed material set out as well. I want to see both sides. What I don't want to see is just the accusations without the information that shows that the accusations are not credible. I also don't want to just see the information that shows the accusations are incredible without the accusations. I want to see it all out there so that the court of public opinion can have a fair trial.
Well, Carl Sagan said that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And clearly Epstein was a wealthy guy. So you're saying that he was a target for plaintiff attorneys and accusers to make these claims against them, often false, in an effort for self-enrichment?
That's true. And so that happened after he died. Even after he died, people start saying, "Oh, yeah, we knew Jeffrey Epstein." I would say probably a very large percentage of the people who collected money never met Jeffrey Epstein, never heard of him, just decided to get on the bandwagon and earn some money. And, many millions of dollars have been paid out. I have absolutely and adamantly refused to pay a single penny, and have fought and successfully fought the false charges against me and prevailed. So, but the difference between me, for example, and Prince Andrew, I'm not I've never had sex with anybody other than my wife during the entire relevant time period. Andrew, on the other hand, may not have had sex with the person he was accused of, but he couldn't sit for a deposition because his nickname was Randy Andy. And the Queen, who was then alive, did not want him to sit for a deposition where he'd have to talk about all of his other things in his life. So he was prepared to settle. I was not prepared to settle because I have nothing to hide.
Well, in early 2002, I think in January, the flight log said that you were on a plane, and there was two females listed as SK and GM.
He had usually the plane had 9 or 10 people on it. When he was flying down, his friends, they were mostly middle-aged people. But I don't know if the flight logs had anybody's ages, but there was never anybody inappropriate or never anybody young on the flights at all. They were always people of appropriate ages. And there was always a good reason for why I was on the plane. I'm not somebody who loves to travel. So when he needed me for something, he would allow me to go on his plane. One day he needed me very much, and I was making a speech in Montreal, and I said I couldn't make it. I was giving him legal advice. I couldn't make it. And he said, "Oh, yes, you can, because I'll allow you to take my plane." So I went to Montreal, just me and the pilots, the two pilots, made my speech. They waited for me, and they took me back home. So you'll find that in the manifests as well. So every time I went on the plane, there was a good reason for it. I never went on the plane for anything inappropriate, because I have to tell you, I've never done anything sexually inappropriate in my life, period, end dispute. As I like to say, I never had sex with an underage female, even when I was an underage male. During the time I've known Jeffrey Epstein, and during any of the relevant period of time, I don't flirt with people. I don't hug people. So I have nothing absolutely to hide. And Epstein knew that. He said to me over and over again, of all my married friends, you're the only one whose marriage I am jealous of, because you seem to have a really loving, monogamous relationship with your wife, which is absolutely true.
Well, I think what a lot of people want to know is, why is it that after his 2008 conviction, you continued to interact with him?
Because I was his lawyer, and there were always legal issues that came up. For example, he had to register as a sex offender. He didn't want to do that. And so we challenged it, and we went to court. Then he would call me and say, does being a registered sex offender require me to tell the French authorities? So if you look all of my connections to him post 2008, you'll see there are very few of them, number one, and they're professional. I never had any never had dinner with him, never had a meal with him or anything post that period of time. The relationship was at that point in time completely professional. I maintained relationships with all of my clients. I maintained a relationship with Klaus von Bülow till the day he died. I maintained a relationship with O.J. Simpson, phone calls, Mike Tyson. When you're a lawyer, you don't end your relationship the day the person is sentenced. I visited him in prison once when he was there in jail, and continued to maintain a relationship. The Wall Street Journal had a story today saying back in 2003, for his 50th birthday, a bunch of us sent him letters and stuff like that. I don't remember it, but probably I did. So did Donald Trump.
So you think the letter that Donald Trump, that the Wall Street Journal says that Donald Trump sent to Epstein, you think that's valid?
I don't. Doesn't sound like Donald Trump to me. And the material that they claim I sent to him didn't seem. I showed it to my wife too. She said, "You don't do things like that." It was the cover of not Vanity Fair. What's the other magazine? A cover of one of the magazines. It was Vanity Fair. And they claim I turned the cover from Vanity Fair to Vanity Unfair and changed the cover to reflect Jeffrey Epstein or something like that. I never ever doing that. I don't think I ever did it, but if I did, big deal. It's perfectly innocent. I was sending him a birthday present, a birthday note at their request when he was 50 years old, along with a whole bunch of other people. Look, people were friendly with Jeffrey Epstein. I was introduced to him by the lady Lynn Rothschild, who basically was his pimp on Martha's Vineyard. She introduced him to everybody on Martha's Vineyard. She introduced him to President Clinton. She introduced him to all the prominent people. She would claim that he was this wonderful guy, When she called me, I'd never met him, never heard of him. She said, "I want you to meet my friend." I said, "No, my family's up here. I don't want to meet him." She said, "Please, you got to do me this favor." And so I spent a half an hour with him. He brought a bottle of champagne over to the house. We sat and we talked. Then he invited me to Leslie Wexner's 59th birthday and sent his plane. And on the people at that birthday party, they were all men. And it was Shimon Peres, then former Prime Minister of Israel, John Glenn, the senator from Ohio, the head of Sotheby's, and Wexner and Epstein. So those were the people. And flew on a plane there and back for Wexner's 15th birthday. I enjoyed it. I'd never been in Wexner's house. He has a museum. He has some of Picasso's best paintings and other paintings by great people. So that was the nature of the relationship, and it continued until the day he was arrested.
And so let's go to what they call the sweetheart deal in Florida.
Yeah.
So was there compelling evidence against Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein, that he committed a sex crime? And if there was, how did you get the prosecution to drop so many charges?
Well, first, I'm a good lawyer, and I've been very successful in getting prosecutors to drop charges. And prosecutors know that if they litigate against me, there's a good chance they're going to lose. In this case, there was no evidence. We're talking about the first case, the 2005, 6, 7, 8 case. There was no evidence that any of the females crossed state lines, so there was no federal jurisdiction. There were only 2 girls who were willing to file complaints against him. One of them was like 20 years old, above the age of consent, and the other one was 17 and a half, I think 3 months or 4 months short of her 18th birthday. And as a result of that, the federal government knew it couldn't succeed in a federal prosecution, and so they agreed with a state prosecution, and he ended up getting 18 months in jail, which was longer than anybody previously had ever gotten for having this kind of consensual sex with an allegedly underage girl. So it was not a sweetheart deal. Epstein hated the deal. He fired me. He refused to pay my legal bill. He thought I was a terrible lawyer, and he didn't take it as a great sweetheart deal. We worked very hard to get that deal. I worked with the assistant U.S. attorney, a guy named Jeffrey Sloman, who was one of the toughest and best lawyers I ever encountered. On our legal team was Ken Starr, the former chief prosecutor against Bill Clinton, Jay Lefkowitz, a senior partner at one of the big firms in New York, Roy Black, probably the best lawyer in Florida. I assembled the best legal team I could for Jeffrey Epstein, and we got what we thought was a pretty good deal, but he thought was a terrible deal.
To summarize, Leslie Wexner was likely blackmailed, or well, you can just say Leslie Wexner was blackmailed. You were on the island before there was anything there, and
with my wife, my daughter, and a professor from Harvard. Yeah.
And then Trump did appear at Jeffrey Epstein's mansion.
Definitely, he was definitely. They knew each other, and they had a falling out. I don't remember exactly when, but over a real estate deal and over an accusation that Jeffrey had acted inappropriately to a member's daughter. So their relationship ended. But I only saw Trump, I think, one time with him at a large event. I didn't say hello. I didn't know him at the time.
Do you have any idea how old the member's daughter at Mar-a-Lago was?
No, I've never heard anything. That was just hearsay. I don't even know if it's true. So I don't know whether it's true or not. And I don't know what the nature of the relationship was, whether it was flirtation or worse. I just don't know. I just heard that. But then I heard that wasn't true, that the reason for the breakup had to do with they were both competing for a piece of real estate, and Trump ultimately got it.
I got one question I got to ask for my brother, and that is, do you think Klaus von Bülow killed his wife?
Oh, I can't ever say anything about a client who I represented. I don't think there was, I'll say this, I don't think there was a crime. I think that she did not take care of her health. We know there are photographs of her smoking a cigarette next to an oxygen tank after she fainted. So this was a woman who had reactive hypoglycemia and was eating sweets and maybe injecting herself. So there was certainly reasonable doubt about whether he ever committed a crime, but I don't really feel comfortable commenting on. But let me put it this way: I have no information that was given to me by him or anybody else that would suggest that he was guilty of attempting to kill his wife. But watch the movie and you'll.
Oh, we know the movie well. Yeah, you're kind enough to sign autograph a book for my brother and everyone. If you have not seen Alan's movie, if you want to see an amazing film, Reversal of Fortune is fascinating, and you can kind of get an idea of how Alan has acted as an attorney over the years and the amazing use of science to exonerate his clients. He was a groundbreaking attorney in this regard, and much of what you see in courtrooms today has precipitated from Alan Dershowitz. And Alan, you've been there with me through some very difficult times, and I'm very grateful for it. And I was a January 6th defendant, and they took my law degree away while I was being prosecuted. And I called you yesterday. You're the first person I let know that I will be getting my law degree back. So,
congratulations. Also, this demonstrates I've maintained a relationship with you after the case was over. We won the case, and I'll continue to advise you if you have any issues growing out of that case till the day both of us die. So don't be surprised that I maintained a legal relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. I maintain a relationship with all of my clients when they need my advice about things that happened while I was their lawyer. So that's very common for lawyers.
You're a good man, Alan. Thank you for joining us, man. And would you hold up the book one more time?
Yeah, and you're a good man. And, it's interesting because, we disagree about January 6th, but we've maintained a good relationship. We can agree to disagree, unlike the people on Martha's Vineyard, who, if they don't like who you represented, they won't speak to you or allow you to speak.
Do we agree that on January 6th, police let people in?
Yes. Oh, I have no doubt about that. I've seen the video, of course, and we use that in your defense. There's no question they were waving people in. And there's a case called Rayleigh versus Ohio, a Supreme Court decision, which makes it clear that if the police wave you in, you're entitled to do that. And you can't be prosecuted for that. So, this was a very interesting legal case. You stood up for not only your own rights, but the rights of other people. And you don't have to agree with your clients about their politics in order to defend them vigorously and maintain a friendly relationship with them. That's always been my attitude from the beginning, and it will continue throughout my life.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And Alan, we will talk again soon, my friend.
Thank you. Good luck and keep doing good things.